This is the Mettle podcast, and I am your host, Coach Matt Thomann. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mettle podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. Welcome back to the Mettle podcast. I am your host, Coach Matt Thomann, and I am here with Rochester Rocket head coach Derek Leonard. I have had a lot of really good coaches on here. I've had state champions on here. I talk about all sorts of things, but Coach, you're the first time I've had somebody who's won. Is it 9 state championships now?
It is. Yep, it's 9. Yep,
and it's 9 out of how long? How many years did it take you to do that?
I started here. I started at Rochester in 2005. So our first one was in 10. And then we won a few in a row, and the 9th one was this year. So yeah.
So have you crossed the threshold of where you've had more years that you have won state championships than where you haven't?
I think I'm right in the middle. I'm 50-50 right now.
No, that's not bad. I mean, we'll take it, right?
Yeah, they'll take it. I haven't thought about that. I have to think maybe this is year 18. So yeah. So.
I love to put things in perspectives, and like, I'm sure that there's at times you're like, I don't know if I'm doing what I ought to be doing or what, and you're like, yeah, like it's interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, no.
Now, what? Hold on. You're probably not counting the COVID year, right?
I am counting the COVID year, yeah.
So that's a default because there was no state championship to have.
True, in Illinois there wasn't. Yeah, you're right. So 17.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it counts as a year, but yeah,
right. No,
yeah. Of the 17 years that you could have of the 17 years that you could have played for a state championship, you've won 9 times.
You have, yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's not bad, Coach. It's not bad. We'll take it. No, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but I'd love to put a little bit, because I have a lot of listeners. Of course, I'm originally from Illinois, so most of my listeners are from Illinois, but I got people from other places who shockingly don't know who you are and don't know about the Rochester Rockets, right? Before we get in, go ahead.
I said I like it that way.
Yeah, I know. Now, before we get anything else, I know that you recently got, was it the Chicago Bears nominated you for a Coach of the Year, NFL Coach of the Year, high school Coach of the Year?
I did, yep. It was very good, very nice honor, I should say, yep. So.
Yeah, and that's all well and good, but I'm just curious, and this is not that type of podcast, but do you have any sort of inkling onto what polls is going to do? It's killing me. Like, what are we doing with Fields?
Yeah, I'm a big Bears fan.
I am too. That's why I'm asking you.
I would personally build around him, and you look at Detroit, for example.
Yeah.
They took Jared Goff. He was a throw-in on a pick, or a trade with Stafford. They really thought they were going to get rid of him, and they they made the team as good as they can. And now look, and I think Jared Goff's, in the NFL, he's probably middle of all the 32 quarterbacks. I think he's in the middle somewhere. But they have such a good team, and they've built a great team around him where, I think Justin I think with the right offensive coordinator, he could do some really good things. I went to practice. That was one of the things. And I've seen a lot of people throw, and I've seen a lot of people in person. He is probably one of the most impressive people in person. And just physical size. I didn't realize how big he was. His thighs, his shoulders. And then you watch him throw. I've seen a lot of good people throw. And he's as good throwing the ball as I've seen. Now, I think he has some things he's got to work on. But I also think, you bring in the right guy that does the right things with him, he could be special. But
Yeah.
to circle back around, I think you build your team. I think you trade back, try to get the Harrison kid because I think he's a once in a lifetime type of receiver. I think then you got another pick coming 8 or 9. You take anybody, hey, a tight end, a DN, say, you know what I mean? And that's going to be the best player at that position. And then I think you got a little wiggle room, and you can always go get a free agent quarterback the next year if it doesn't work out. You can,
Yeah.
I just
So
think he's a special talent.
I do too. And the people from Rochester are going to be mad at me for saying this, and then my buddy, your boss, Dan Cox, is going to be mad at me. But why don't you could polish up your resume and throw it in? I'd put you there at the OC for the Bears. It can't be. Hey, look, it can't be worse than what they've had. No offense.
It's a lot of work. It seems like
it is. It really is.
And Twitter, all these social medias, it multiplies compared to what it used to be.
It's funny that you say that because my wife and I were watching some games the other day, and you look at all these NFL coaches now and how they're progressively getting younger and younger, and I'm like, because it's because of the work. Nobody wants, like, you get older and you're like, I don't need that. I wouldn't need it.
Disagree at all. And I think Nick Saban, I really believe he saw this transfer portal and he saw this NIL and was like, this is just I think he thought, man, what am I doing here? Yeah. I got the rest of my life. I'm well taken care of. And I just don't think he liked the way college football is going. I could be totally wrong.
Yeah.
From the few things I've heard, and just a lot of these guys, like you said, these older guys that, like my dad, I thought he'd probably coach forever. And the thing that really pushed him, accelerated his retirement, was COVID. And so you get these situations, and I think in college it's now the NIL, it's the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. That world has totally changed, and you kind of have to sell your soul, and even some things maybe you don't believe. And it's the younger people, hey, they don't know any better. The older guys are like, man, like you said, why am I doing this? Why am I doing that?
It's interesting, and you mentioned your father there, and I'd love to get into that, talking about because you guys are the subject of a book that's been out, right?
Yes.
I've got it right here, Coach. Just so you know, I got it. Victorious. It's a good read. It's very interesting. Although, now that I've finished it, it's not up to date, right? You've got another state championship that it doesn't even mention on there now. So you're gonna have to make amend, add a little bit to it. But talk to me a little bit, and the title here, and that's what I want to get into. It's Victorious, and it says a story of faith, family, and football in the Heartland. You know what? I'm going to go in that order, right? Faith, family, and football. Let's talk about faith first, and your faith and how that applies to football and life and all things.
Yeah, it's it's everything. It's what comes first. It's I saw, and a lot of this is in the book, but I saw my father. Because this is the only life I've lived. As a kid, all I saw was a high school football coach. He then became the athletic director. So I was at all the sporting events, raised in Springfield. And I saw him through his highs and lows. And his low was, early. I was probably, young. I was 7, 8, 9, and then 10, 11, 12. And man, had great teams and never won the championship. But his ups and downs were football related, right? I mean, he lived through football. And what a lot of people, and there's a lot of people in this world today who live through something else, whether their job, whether it's a sport, whether it's their children. And that's all going to go bad on us one day. And man, he had some great teams, and never won. He was a great father, great husband. And so it was never that, but he was missing something. And so long story short, he found Jesus, and he found him in a barber shop. We had an adopted brother who got free haircuts, and and he's to this day, he's best friend. He's great friends with the bishop here in town. He's the coach of the Catholic school, Sacred Heart Griffin.
Right, yeah.
And so, man, he's got, any nun, priest he can go talk to. And he had talked to them. And not that they weren't great people, just man, that wasn't helping. So my brother gets his haircut one day, and Rick the barber, who you can read in the book, is man, there's no hiding it. There's pictures of Jesus, there's the Bible. He won't talk to you about it, but it's there. And so Dad came to pick my brother up and said, man, I'm really struggling with something in my life. And Rick, it kind of opened the door for Rick. And Rick, from that point on, my dad, I tell people the next few days were, man, my dad, and I was, like I said, I was probably 11 or 12 at the time. And, but I instantly saw a change in my father. And it's nothing that he could have done. It's nothing anybody could have done. I mean, there's only one thing, and that was Christ. And, like I said, he was a great man, good father, good husband in the first place. But what changed in him is a total change, total 180. And I knew from that point on, whatever changed him and whatever I saw a change in my father's, I got to have that. And that just changed our whole trajectory of life, honestly. And my mother's, my brothers, me, what I was going to do and how I was going to coach and teach. And so that's kind of where I am today, and everything I learned from that time and then you go from there. It did take him a while to win state championships. My father won 6. Was the most winningest coach in the state of Illinois. But you know what? The losses after that didn't quite matter as much. That football wasn't what made him, and he could get through those. And he then was coaching the bigger picture, and he was good at the kids loved him. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like he was neglecting that, but personally inside him, his worth was in those championships and his victories. And in the end, you just lose that. And so I learned so much from that. I know that's a long explanation.
No, I think it's, and I'm just here taking notes because there's so much I see in there that's so, like the idea of a ripple effect, whether that's, and just how important that is, and knowing that, one barber, right, changed this entire trajectory. But I'll give your kudos to your father in the fact that, as you mentioned, he said he goes into the barbershop one day and opens up and says, "Hey, I'm struggling." Right.
Mm-hmm.
That, Coach, just between a couple guys here talking and doing stuff in my line of work and stuff, that's huge, because there a lot of guys, coaches, whatever, heads, fathers, husbands, all those things, they struggle to make that say, "Hey, I'm struggling," and tell somebody. And I don't care if it doesn't have to, honestly, he didn't go tell a therapist or he went and told his barber, right? But at least it open it up and making you feel a little bit vulnerable, right? And be like, "Hey, I'm struggling." And I think that's it all started. So to me, it's that whole trajectory you talked about, because your dad was willing to just say, "Hey, I'm struggling a little bit today," or for a while.
Yeah. And something inside of him, and you'd have to know Rick the bar. I mean, Rick is about 6'8", but he couldn't dribble a basketball. They were so different. And he knew Rick a little bit just because he dropped my brother off because he gave free haircuts to foster kids, at the time. And but man, something spoke to him and said, "Man, this is, and it's crazy." And then you read in the other book, which is kind of cool, which most people will probably know. Scott Hansen, who's the Red Zone guy at the time, was working for TV 20, which is the local station here. And he was, totally local, brand new, probably in his 20s. And man, he was going through the same thing. And this was about 3 or 4 years later. So he had saw what Dad was very vocal about what happened and thanking and giving praise to God. And so every interview, so man, he went through the same thing. And he just called Dad one day out of the blue and said, "Man, I'm really struggling." And Dad kind of changed his whole trajectory now. And, Scott's a great Christian man. And obviously went from Springfield, Illinois, and doing local news to doing the Red Zone. And so it's kind of, it's that side of the story. And that's why I love the book. I could have cared less from my standpoint, honestly.
I know, I know, but
it was good I wanted my dad's story. I wanted his for my kids, for my grandkids one day. And I really wanted his story out there. because I think it's special and I think it's really good.
Well, and I think, and I agree. I enjoyed it, and it's, yeah, I know, but sometimes you have to put it out there a little bit and in a way that, but it helps give. It's going to reach more people that way, which is the whole point, right? And a couple things you mentioned there on your dad about how the not struggling to get the state championship and changing his perspective where it was less about the wins and less about the state championships. And I think that's a really good point there, that it changes your identity, which is really important, because your dad went from being just, his identity was a football coach. Therefore, everything is wrapped up with the wins. Everything is wrapped up to wins, right?
Yeah.
And you coach a lot of kids who that is their identity, right?
Yep.
And I think that kids struggle, especially when they, you go through, like, you have a lot of kids that have come through your program that have won state championships, and then you get out of high school and nobody cares. Nobody cares about you anymore. And I don't mean to say it mean like that, but you have to have another identity.
You do. That's right. No, it's I tell those kids all the time, I have rings that, man, just sit in that thing, and you know what, everyone at the time, it was the greatest thing in the world. And, and next season they're going to want 10. And if I don't get 10, they're going to say, oh, he should have done this. He should have did that. And, you know what I mean? And I say, hey, it's great for a little while, and it's always a great memory. You're going to make great friends, but in the end, it doesn't mean much at all. And it's the journey. It's who you become. It's who you are as a person and as a man, what you become in the future years, right? And that you learn so much from football, in my opinion, through because of the team aspect and all team sports. But football's, I always say, it's a little different, man. Linemen, those big guys, they can't play. They can only play certain sports. And you got big guys with little guys, with fast guys, with guys who like to get, with guys who don't like to hit. And you all come together for that same goal. And the great teams are the ones who really love each other and care about each other, And I think that's what we got going here. And then you don't want to fail each other. And then you don't want to let a person down. And that carries on in life then, that carries on later when you have situations in your life. I had two, and I played for my father, and, when we lost the state championship, it took my dad, I think, 20 years to win one, and then he won quite a few,
Well, that's a more normal trajectory, Coach. Just so
it is. And so, but it was weird how it went. But my sophomore year, we lost. My brother was a senior, and man, just a devastating loss. We had it, and it was my brother's group. So we had a lot of friends. I got two coaches now that were on that team with me, and that coach with me, and it was we were devastated. We thought, man, this is the worst thing. And then, man, my brother ended up passing. He got in a car crash at 23.
Yeah.
My mom died a few years ago of cancer, and that's when you realize, man, there's more important things in this world, and things that got to get you through that. And that's when you step back and you say, okay, now this is hard. And there's good things in football and life that helped me with those things. Obviously being a Christian, I think, was number one.
There's
a lot of things that helped me get through those times. That, man, that
and
more important than any state championship. So
and you're talking about, and of course, for you, and if we start mixing family and football, we're talking about, it's not just state championships. It's you and the old famous Leonard Bowl, which doesn't exist anymore, is front and center for a lot of that.
Thank God. Yeah, no, that was tough. It was. At first, when I took this job in 2005, we were a smaller school, and so we were in a different conference. I thought we'd never be. If you would have told me when I took that job, you're going to be playing Griffin, my dad's team, and be in that conference in 5 years, I would not have taken this job. And so thank God I didn't know at the time. So I took it, played. Man, long story short, we were kind of in a weird spot where not many people are enrollment, right? We had to go or we were going to have to play up. I think everybody, and basketball and everyone else, played down a little bit in a smaller conference, and the football played up. So long story short, in 8, they said, all right, we're going to Central State 8 so we can all be in the same conference. Well, Central State 8 was a step up. And
Yeah.
in 2010, basically, I had to play my father first game, and we played for the next 15 years. And every game meant something, not just from the father and son thing. It always lasted. It was always the Leonard Bowl. But every game in honor of his team and our team always was rather for the conference championship.
Right.
Always was a big game, and it was a big game this year, even without Dad, because it was 2 good football teams.
Sure.
But it was really hard on him. It was really hard on my mother at the time. And because she wanted everyone to be happy. And when it was over, it was over. And it probably wasn't as hard for me because we were shooting. They were the landmark. They were they were where you wanted to be, where we wanted to be as a program at that time. And so I could get past the father-son thing a little bit and say, hey, I got to get this program to them. And somehow we beat them first year, which was crazy. And then from there on out, it was just, man, it was, like I said, it was always a good game. But that was our aiming point. They are kind of the cream of the crop in Central Illinois, anyone who knows Illinois football.
Yeah.
And so, but then it got old. It truly did.
Yeah.
Everyone else loved it. We hated it. It changed our relationship for a week and a half.
Oh yeah.
Yes, we talk football. That's that is our number one talking point is football, sports, but football. And so I can't talk to him because I didn't want to lie to him. I didn't want to BS him. I didn't want to, and he kind of probably didn't want to do the same with me. And so we just didn't talk. I'd call my mom and talk to her. But that was it. So when it was done.
You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mental Mettle Coaching now offers professional development for coaches, explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mental Mettle Coaching today. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. And then of course, as you mentioned, it changed a lot when your mom went with the issues with the family struggle there. And that just puts more of a highlight on the whole situation.
It highlighted it times 10. And because she really was the center of everything, and she was so loved and such a special person that when that happened, number one, it affected us, our family, obviously, but it affected everybody else. And then everybody else wanted to be great and come in, and they'd give a cancer game, and the Bears came in. I think that was their first ever crucial catch, what they still do in the NFL. But the Bears had kind of did it first. So, man, all these cameras, the USA Football. So again, like you said, that game got multiplied times 100 plus what it already was.
Yeah.
And that carried on for a few years, and that kind of, in a good way went away. And so, man, it just never, the 15 years, it never slowed down, right? It gained momentum with things like that. And then just the great games. And then last few years is because of COVID, stupid COVID, man, we had to play in the playoffs. They were never our size.
Right.
The great thing about our games was we could play in the regular season. We'd go to 4A, they go to 5 or 6A, right? Bigger school. And it was great. Well, COVID hit, something happened within the rule. All the private schools go back to the regular enrollment. So now we're in the playoffs together for 3 years. And and that adds a whole nother, now you're, you knew during the year, hey, they're going to make us better. We're going to make them better, right? And we're going to leave and we're going to be able to make a run. And that game was a stepping stone and hopefully made us both better, right? Now, hey, one of you are going home, and all these seniors that you love and you've worked hard for are going home. And all 3 years we played each other in the semis every year.
Well, because you're going to, right? I mean, when you got two really good programs and you're going to end up in the same spot, and that makes it so hard. But yeah,
and I think that got him out to COVID, and then I think that we won the first one, they won the next two, and I think him just seeing his grandkids, like, man, when we lost, my sons were crying.
Oh, of course.
He was just devastated. So he's about to go to the state championship, and he's just, you can see it. I mean, he is drained. I mean, he is like, and you're going to state championship, you should enjoy it, and but man, I just think all those things added together. I think he was, because like I said, I thought he'd go probably till he's dead, but
but how's he like? So this was his first year out of it, right?
This was. It was very interesting, and I think he misses the games. I think that. We have two of my grandsons, and then my nephew who plays for me. He's a freshman now, so he had 3 different games a week to go to. So that kept him very busy, and then plus my varsity game if he wanted to, and then he went to Griffin games too. And so he was going to 4 games a week. He was working with FCA football. He went to, I think, maybe 50 different teams and talked to the teams and the coaches. And he would also watch practice, and he'd help the coaches. Like, they would be like, hey, man, what do we need to fix? Or what, man? And more CEO stuff. Hey, where are we lacking? Where are we wasting time? Where are we doing this? And so, man, he went to 50 different schools. And so this first year, I think he did good. I think the games he missed, he doesn't miss parents. He doesn't miss the practice.
Yeah.
He doesn't miss a lot of that stuff, I know. But I think his competitive spirit, he probably, he's a competitor like me, and I think he missed that.
Sure.
He was so busy doing other stuff, which was good. So it was a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, he's running around being that consultant, right? But that's fun. You get to put stuff out, but none of the pressure's on you. So it's I'm sure it's got to be all right. Let's get into.
I'll tell you one thing. He never got to see a game. It was funny. He went to the first Friday off. He went to an 8-man football game because he had never in 35, 40 years had to do a thing on Friday night except for his games. So he had never seen this small 8-man football.
Right.
So he went to a lot of games that he was never able to.
Yeah.
And that's like my life. I mean, I tell people I didn't go on many vacations because we didn't. Back then, you didn't miss practice. You didn't miss a game. I was a basketball, football, baseball player. We didn't. I mean, we'd maybe take. We did a church camp. I didn't take vacations, and it was great life. I loved it, but we didn't. I didn't go to many college games because we were always playing that weekend, and didn't go to many NFL games. Didn't do a lot of things, and that was our life. And so,
but when's the last time you had a normal Thanksgiving, Coach?
It's been a while. Whether he was it, we were it.
You're always prepping. You're always prepping for the next day, aren't you?
We are, and that's it's a good thing. I tell people.
Oh, absolutely.
The other way, but you also wouldn't mind a good Thanksgiving, and but that's
So. Yeah, we've talked a little bit about faith, a little bit about family. Let's and a little bit about football, but let's dive into the football a little bit. And I told you before we started, what I know about football, we could fit in a thimble. I turn on the Bears games and yell at them and tell them what they ought to be doing, knowing I don't know anything. I didn't play football. I went to a really small high school that didn't have it. So I'm all a baseball, basketball guy, so I don't know much. So we're not going to have this long conversation about how you were. People tell me that you're some sort of offensive savant, like putting all these things together. I'll believe them. I'll believe them because I know you have 9 state championships and and a lot of that is by putting up some numbers. So that's great. I think it's fantastic. But I'm more curious about the fact that how do you take these ideas of yours and translate it into getting kids to be all in? Because not like you can draw stuff on a chalkboard like a mad scientist all day, but if you can't get the kids to do it, nothing matters. Absolutely nothing matters. So that's what I care about. How do you get the kids to buy in and do this before you have 9 state championships? It's easy now. I'm better, right?
Yeah.
How do you do it early on?
That's a great question. That's a question a lot of people have asked me, and number one, I think it's God, because I really believe I was put in the perfect place at the right time. Because I was 24, 23. I was 23 when I took the job, 24 when I started. I was just getting married, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And all I knew was, man, I had watched my dad do it, and I had some great coaches through college and other places, and I just put my head down and go. I didn't have all these. I'm not an extremely organized person. I didn't have all these. So many people have these things they go by. The 4 C's: character, courage, and that's great. But man, I believe what I did at first is I made it fun. We got the basketball players out, we got the athletes out, and we just didn't get them out. We did things. We threw the ball around. We had fun. We were 3-6, and then we were 5-5, 5-5, 3 years. But we had fun. I think we had fun doing it. I had as much fun coaching those 3 years as I did this year in the state championship, or any year for that matter. You know what I mean? And because we didn't know any better, we just, man, like I said, we were putting our head down and we worked hard. And I think what I learned from my father, which I think is the number one thing, is whatever you talk about, whatever you preach, you better walk your walk and talk your talk. And in the end, if you don't do that, then you're a phony. And they're not going to take your word in the huddle on the last play for the winning play in the game. They're not going to take your word for it in late. They're never going to truly believe in you. And that doesn't mean you don't sin and make mistakes. But what it means is they see you walking that line as they are walking that line. And I think that's honestly, it's as simple as that, because like I said, I just didn't know any better. I was young. I had a goal, and I wanted to be the best we could be. And we didn't even talk about a state championship for a while because I knew that probably really wasn't feasible. I told him, one day we're going to be state champs. I said, it's probably not while you're here, but we're going to be state champs one day. And I tell those kids to this day, man, they were truly the start of a lot of this. And
Sure.
But then
I think
it was, and then once you get going, now, hey, if I love on them and I am who I say I am, and I take care, you got to love the worst kid on the team like you love the best kid on the team, and you got to truly believe that. You got to truly take care of those kids, and then then that grows from there. And if you're not that, and not everyone's that, and some of your assistants better be like that, or you. And all that goes together, and who you put around you is so important. And I've been blessed with a coaching staff that's really stayed together. I got 4 or 5 guys that have been with me since day one, which is crazy in Illinois for what we pay.
Yes.
No, it's not Mr. Cox's fault. So, but it's Illinois. I mean, what they pay me and what they pay our assistants, it's like $2,000. Dollars. It's for my assistants. It's crazy for the time they put in, but yet they stay around. And so, I know that's a vague answer, but I think it's a truthful answer.
It's a truthful answer, but I'm going to be honest. I'm going to take you to task to it on it here just a bit. And here's where. When you put out, and I know you're telling me the truth. I know you're telling me the truth about, hey, we have fun, right? And I love on them. It's fantastic. But I think it would be remiss because we're painting a picture like you guys start every practice holding hands, singing Kumbaya. And but you talk about Mr. Cox, I've had conversation about him. I know that practices have a lot of expectations as well.
Yeah, no, and again, I got that from the people that coached me, right? And what we do is man, we're fast, no huddle. We are different, and especially when you talk about 2006 or 7, we were really different. And so I was kind of going off of that. And now that was I know I don't look like a quarterback. I was a quarterback. So this is still fun. This was fun for me. I wanted to be no huddle. I wanted to throw it around. So I'm playing quarterback on the sidelines. I'm just not executing and throwing the ball, right?
Right.
And so I'm doing all this. And so it was still competitive and fun for me. But how we practiced it was fun, but it was also, and this was now people talk about not conditioning. I haven't conditioned in 18 years. I have not conditioned one time because our practices are so tough that we don't need condition. You know what I mean? Where we're going to practice so hard in our time that I don't need, because I remember as a kid, if you told me we had to run the Cyclone Mile at the beginning of practice, my whole practice was ruined. That's all I'm thinking about. I do not want practice to end. This is awful. I'm dreading this. And so going fast and making what practice is, we have fun, but it's tough. And they know there's expectations. They know there are, it's going to be done a certain way. And if you love each other, you're okay with that and you're all in. So yes, it's a combination of the two. It is tough. We are physical. We are, but I think that's part of loving each other too. Love is tough, and love is, like I said, most people do not like getting hit in football. I say that. My dad told me that a long time ago, right? It's less than 10%. 90% of those kids do not want to get hit or don't want to hit, right? But you lose that somewhere I remember when I used to play, that got shut off, right? Whether I was so competitive, whether I cared for the guys around me so much that I was going to give everything I had to go play, right? Then I've done things where it scared me, and I didn't care for if we won or lost, or I didn't care who was around me. And then, man, that fear creeps back in your mind. And so that's what I love about football, but it's a combination of all those things. And that's a good question.
I think that one of the things is, and that if you have to have, if you want to be at the sort of level you're at, the expectations have to be up here. They have to be. But I think if you want to keep kids going out and keep kids playing and keep kids happy, the love and the fun has to be at that same level.
It does. Yep.
And I think some kids, and honestly, that's why coaching is hard, because it is not, and you can't fake it. It's got to be an all in for you, just like it is for your kids.
It has to be organic. If it's not, to get to this level, it has to be as real, and the ups and downs, it has to be organic. Rules, like at the beginning, I don't ever hand out one thing. I don't have one rule. I have one rule. It's don't embarrass me. You don't embarrass the team. You don't embarrass your family. And because every kid's different, and I get, when you throw out rules, you have to stick by them. There's a right or wrong. And that doesn't mean that that's a wrong way to approach it. But when you're organic and you have a program, those kids aren't going to mess up. You know what I mean? And if I said, man, if you're late to practice 2 times, you're not. I got, hey, just like I got kids that parents aren't home on time, and if they are 10 minutes late, sometimes that's a blessing that they're there even. And so how can I hold that kid accountable? And that's just one small situation. This happens all the time. And when you have 90 kids 100 kids on a football team, they know what's organic, what's real, and I got to stick. Now, hey, they know where I stand, and they know what's right and what's wrong, and they don't need rules to see it. You know what I mean? And so, hey, when
I
they
do.
go on the wrong path and you smack it, and when they're in the right, yeah, hey, we're good. And so, it's
I
kind of how
think that
I do it.
I think that there's a, it's not a misconception. If we were saying it, we would write it down this way, but it has to be so forefront of your mind as a coach to keep remembering that you're here to serve the athletes,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And that's hard sometimes because it's like egos get in the way, and
Winning takes over,
yeah,
and whatever you have to do to win in your mind, it's tough because of pressure as a coach. I'm gonna get fired if I don't win, right?
yeah,
I don't care if it's high school. I don't care if it's parents will fire you at JFL, college, NFL. If you don't win, you're gone. So it is tough. But what I love the best is the summer practices because we have
yeah,
our competition is ourselves. And my dad always taught me that your biggest competitor is you, and it's not the person across from you. And when in football, when you have penalties, when you turn the ball over, when you do all those things, you beat yourself. A lot of times, it's not the person across you. Now, sometimes those people create that, but those people, it's you, and it's your problem. You know what I mean? And so, um, it's but it is tough because it is. And I tell our coaches, our job, and it's like you said, my job as a coach, and I believe this equals state championships, is I have to get each player to play to their God-given talent. Now, their talent, everyone's different, right? And most players will do just enough. And I talk about a gas tank a lot and it being filled or half filled or 75% filled. I said, hey, if say you're the quarterback and you know you're better than me, right? My tank isn't near as big. God didn't make me near as athletic. And you play just hard enough to beat me and be able to start over me. But your tank's only half empty, half full maybe. And I said, we are going to be a terrible team if that's the case,
yeah,
right? And so our job as a coach is to get every kid to play to his God-given talent. And if you can do that, you're going to have a great team. Doesn't always mean a state championship team, but you're going to have a great team. And that's hard. That is a hard concept for coaches and people and players to get. But if they truly know I care about them, like I said, if the worst player on my team truly knows I care, right? And the first person, the best player, the MVP on the team knows I care, and everybody in between, then they're going to try to give me everything they got. And they're going to try to be the best player. And I coach that worst person up in the summer as best as I do the best person because I want him to be the best player he can be and fill his tank, where it's
yeah,
100%. And that's when at the end of the season, like this is one thing I got. We don't give awards. We don't have MVPs. All I do at the banquet is I sit every senior down and for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, I talk to them. I don't write anything down. I talk from my heart. And the kids I talk, that is the easiest to talk about, hands down,
oh,
are the worst players that stuck it out for 4 years, that had the biggest heart, that were the best scout team players that everybody rallied around and loved. Those are by far the easiest kids to talk about because that's what makes the team. That's who all those kids look up to, right? They love the MVP, but it's the kid who stuck it out for 4 years, who never started, who loved everybody, who was on the scout team, who they all look up to. Those are the kids, man, in the end that truly make and break your team.
yeah.
And I think that is so important. And I think that's one thing we've done. That's one thing I saw my dad do and he loved the least of them. And
I
that's
think that,
important.
yeah, I think people think that's coach speak, and it's not.
It's not.
It's so not it because now you don't think that way if you are about the wins, and if you're only about the state championships, you don't necessarily think that way. But it's a good litmus test for me whenever I know a coach really thinks about that stuff because that's what really matters.
That's big picture. That's building a
Yes,
program. That is not thinking seasonal. That's not thinking game to game. That is thinking literally to the point of where we're at today because I can't explain it. And my mom was as big a part. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. She's the
yeah,
most loving human being, and I don't say everyone says that about their mother. I truly believe my mother was the most loving human being I'd ever been around, and she loved everybody, and she loved the least of them to the top of them. And I think I truly believe that makes programs, and that's what lasts. It's not all the stuff you write on the board. It's not what you talk about. It's who you are and what you are, and that will last for years, and that will be organic. Everything else, if you go year to year and you go game by game, you're going to struggle eventually, and we all struggle. Hey, in the end, it's still a talent game, right?
Yeah, no, yes.
And people, I say, don't get that thrown away. I've had some great talent here, and but I said the difference a lot of times in the close games and the wins and losses, and when you're mediocre or above mediocre, are those things, and that's how you build a program. But it is so tough for a coach. I don't blame a coach, and I don't blame, because that's the world they've been put in for
Sure.
their job and their family, and so.
No amount of athletic talent or physical ability can overcome a poor mindset. Anxiety, fear, and negativity will always diminish an athlete's abilities and limit their success. If you're not intentionally developing your child's mental toughness, then they are not reaching their full potential. Mental coaching provides the individual drills needed to build the positive mindset necessary for success on the court and in life. Contact today to schedule a free coaching session and start building mental toughness in your athlete. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle.
That it is hard not to look at it that way. And I think especially at the college level, I think the college level is the worst right now, because it is winter, go home, or you're fired. Yes. And it is, you are a transfer portal. And that's maybe the best way to do it now. But you're taking kids that you probably normally wouldn't have taken. You have to give them money. Your philosophies, you don't even know this kid. You're not building a relationship at all. You don't know if he's mentally tough. All you see is, man, this kid can catch a ball. We've got to bring him in. Otherwise, we're not going to. I don't have a great receiver. We're going to lose.
We have to have it.
Well, he comes in and he is the biggest trash ball of all time. He's one of the worst kids you've ever, and he blows. And then now the team morale is terrible because your best player is terrible. And so I think college is, I think it could be a cesspool right now.
Yeah. So you mentioned mental toughness, and that's a lot what I'm about. And I'm wondering how do you develop that in your players? Do you do anything specific, or does that end up being organic as well?
I think it takes time. I think how you practice and what you demand is very important, right? What they know they can get away with and what they can do is very important. I also think it takes a while. I think we ease into it as freshmen, and it just always goes up, right? And by the time they're middle sophomore year, end of sophomore year, maybe beginning of junior, they truly know what we expect out of them in this football program. And I think from that standpoint, I can't give a better answer. I think that's truly what mental toughness is, and it's a program, and in the end, again, I come back to this. It's how much you care for something and how much you love something. You'll be as mentally tough as you need to be if you truly care about something and you truly love something. Right? I tell people, man, if there's a fight that broke out, maybe, hey, I don't want to fight anybody. But if you're hitting my kid or something has happened to one of my children, all of a sudden, boom, I'm on it. And it's no different. If I care who I'm playing around and I care for the program, I care for the coaches, I care for the people around me, they're my friends, or, hey, we worked hard for the same goal, we're all going in the same direction, then, man, that forms mental toughness, where you get some of these teams, And all they care about is themselves. Their mom and dad care, oh man, is Johnny starting on the summer team? Yes or no? If he's not, we're going to a different team.
Yeah.
And so they're on these teams, they're on these AAU teams, they're on these summer baseball teams, and there's no relationship. All they care about is their batting average, their shooting percentage. Wins and losses don't even matter, right? And so these kids develop these, and football, that's what's great about here is there's no summer, there's no AAU, it's Rochester football. Kids are going to come up, growing up playing with each other. They want to play for our football program. And I promise you, my kids are not that tough. You know what I mean? If you threw them all and got in a fight, I don't know how many of them would win. You know, if we played St. Lawrence this year out of the Southside Catholic League, I guarantee you throw us in there, we're probably going to lose in a fight. So physical toughness, like I said, I had some great athletes. I'm not saying that. So don't say, oh, he acts like he's winning with no talent. That's not the case. But what I'm saying is mental toughness is not always physical toughness, and it's about caring for each other. It's about loving each other. And we are going in the same direction. Where so many sports right now, so many things are not going in the same direction. They're going it's everywhere else, and and a lot of times it's looking at me. What's good for me? What's good for my child, right? And not the whole, and not the, and so getting to that is tough, and it's getting tougher. And I think it's getting tougher for a lot of places because of what is happening at a young age, what's happening below them. And it's yeah.
Well, tough. I think, being able to know that you're working for something bigger than yourself is huge. And when you create that, it gives them. The other thing I notice on the mental toughness, when you talk about your focus is to get kids to play to their full potential, and being accepting the fact that some have more potential than others and the different gas tank. But if you get a kid to play to their full potential athletically, they're going to feel a whole lot better about themselves.
That's right. The confidence from them, whether they're playing or not. And I tell people, I say, hey, I talk about these kids. It's not like he didn't want to play. It's not like this kid didn't want to start, right? At some point he thought, man, how am I going to work as hard as I can and maybe I get a chance. And like I said, their gas tank just, man, God-given ability just wasn't as good. And when you coach them up and they see improvement within themselves, they are going to give you whatever, if you love them. And that's what I always say. Hey, when I get them in the program as a freshman, they're excited to play for Rochester, and they're excited to play for Coach Leonard, right? After about 3 days, that goes away real quick.
Yeah.
If you don't, and really what that parent cares, the good ones, do you love my child? Do you care for him? And are you going to coach him up to the best of your ability? And every kid wants to see improvement, right? If they see whatever they do, if they see good improvement, hey, if I'm going to go try to lose weight and I see the weight coming off, it's easier to lose weight. If I don't see it coming off, it's hard. That Snickers bar looks really good if the weight ain't coming off. And so it's kids are no different. Kids are worse because they could be on the PlayStation, they could be at home, and lazy's easier. And it's and
you talked about COVID.
It's tough.
You talk about COVID, that amplified all that. That made that harder. Which
things changed everywhere.
Yeah.
Times 2, and people, and some places times 3, times 4, and a lot of people don't realize that, and it's bad, and we're trying to get it back. I do think this. I see it changing a little bit, and I hope I'm right. I see the importance of, man, we got to get off our phones. We got to get off social media. There's got to be communication. There's got to be relationships. I do see even young people seeing that as like, man, I'm struggling doing this right now.
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, it just takes a while. So what I want to know is, I know that you've got 9 state championships in the last few years, and I know that you have all this crazy offense that everybody touts about. I want you to tell me something you tried that didn't work. I want to hear about failure from a guy who hasn't seen a lot of what other people on the outside looking in don't see a lot of failure, but I know it has to be there. Maybe I'll be wrong, but
No,
what have you thrown up? What have you thrown up to the board that did not stick?
you're extremely right. And what my dad taught me was, man, don't be afraid to try new things and try. I I can't tell you how many things have gone bad in practice. More things. I know Jordan talked about missing more shots than making shots, right? And one of those famous quotes he had.
Yeah.
I promise you, there's more things that have not worked, and most of them I tried in practice, and maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I thought Thursday, this is coming out. This is awful. Stupid idea, right? And so a lot of times, hopefully, you don't see it on Friday. But I've also things that look good and then they failed on Friday, you know. And but I promise you, there's been more unsuccessful things tried during the week, tried during, you know what I mean? That we,
Yeah.
but we tried it. And there's been a lot of good things that have come from that trying. Hey, like, man, well, let's try this. This is a neat idea. And a lot of ideas my coaches come up with, even some players every once in a while. And it's like, all right, I'll try it. That's a good idea, you know. Now, some ideas, it's like, that's dumb. We're never doing that. Stop. But there's other ideas that you think, okay, I want to try it. And but so many, I promise you, there's a lot of things. And we do some things that are interesting, right? We go extremely fast, do a lot of formations. And I would say I'm willing to take chances. What I think people think about me sometimes is, oh, he just likes doing crazy things. And yes, I do like having fun and doing crazy things. But in the end, I do it because I think it's beneficial and it's somehow going to help us win a football game, or it's going to be beneficial for us. I just don't do it to do it. I think, okay, I got to get you the ball. You're our best player. I got to find different ways to do it. You know, if Matt can catch, I'm going to try all these ways to get you the football. And sometimes it's a different way. And so that goes back to the whole offensively, I have things that I truly believe in, and I have philosophies that I know and I understand. But I have to be flexible each year, each game, sometimes play to play. I have to go to the personnel I have, right? I have to go on the basketball court. I can't press if I don't have great athletes, right? I better sit back in a zone. I'm a press guy, and that's what I love. If I send those guys, I'm sending them on a suicide mission, because that's not what they're good at. And so many people will do what they do and what they know, and that's more important than who they have and what they have, right? And so then you're trying to fit a circle in a square peg, and
that's it.
Look, coming back to it, I have failed. You just don't see it as much because a lot of times it failed and it got dumped in practice, but we tried it. And there's some things that people have seen. They're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And we tried it. We thought, man, it's a good idea. So.
Yeah, I agree. I like to say that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it, right? It has to be there. Has to be there.
It has to be there.
Yeah. Oh, just a great conversation, Coach. Last question. I always ask this question. Last thing I always ask: what did I not ask you that I should have?
Man, you hit it pretty good. I don't think there was much there. Actually, it was good. I like talking about something except for the X's and O's. And
I mean, we could have, but I would just be me. You know, I'd be like, okay, whatever. I know you run some crazy stuff, and they call you an innovator, and it's fun to watch. But
there's times for that, and I love that. I do. I grew up, you know, at that, and that's part of me. And I have fun with that, is the schematics and getting on and trying to counter a defense, right? I do have fun with that, but I also love this side of it because in the end, I coach like I was probably coached, and that's 99% of people. How you were parented, how you were taught, how you were coached is usually how you coach. Now, some people, and some of the best coaches I learned from were some of the worst coaches, because I thought, I'm never going to do it that way.
Well,
and right, and they were good coaches, but they did some things I thought,
I gotcha.
There's a lot of things I do differently than Dad. You know, there's not many, because he was the best, and in my opinion, and but I learned so many things from so many people, good and bad, that helped mold me to who I am today. And a lot of that was, like I said, was right place, right time. I got lucky, and I was around some really good coaches. I was extremely lucky. The path I took and was lucky to take had nothing to do with me, and the people that invested in me as a person, as a player, and I was very lucky growing up, and I lived a great life. I tell people we didn't have much money. We didn't. Hey, I was a high school. My mom was a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah.
My dad was a high school football coach. We did not have a ton of. We weren't poor, but we didn't have much money, and I didn't know any better. I had the greatest life, but I learned so much for what I am today was from all those experiences and how I was raised and what I believe. So.
I mean, I can't wait to see, as we look in the years ahead about you're talking about all these coaches you played under and learned from. I can't wait to see the tree that comes from what you're, all the kids that are, coming from your program. And it's probably starting, but it'll be really cool to see. So
I'm still young. I'm trying to get coaches now that played for me for the last 4 years. I think I got 4 guys now that played for me. It is so cool.
That's great. Coach, it's been phenomenal. I appreciate you taking the time. And I don't know, I guess go Bears. Let's have a good off season, and next year's the year, right? Next year's the year.
I felt like watching the Lions. They kind of clinched their.
I know.
I think we're next. So we pray.
Hope springs eternal. So,
that's right.
All right, Coach, it's been great. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, buddy.
Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mental Mettle Coaching now offers professional development for coaches, explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mental Mettle Coaching today. It's a great day to be a rocket. That is what my friend Dan Cox, who is the superintendent of schools at Rochester, who was mentioned in that podcast, that's what he always says. He loves to say, it's a great day to be a rocket. And when he says it, he means it. When Derek Leonard says we're creating a culture in which people are moving the same direction and everybody's playing for each other, he means it. When I've talked to those two about Rochester football, about the Rochester district, about the Rochester programs, I feel that. And I mean that. I talk with a lot of athletes. I talk with a lot of players. I talk with a lot of coaches. I talk with a lot of administrators. It feels different when I talk to them. It's very, very genuine what I feel when I talk to them. When I figured out I wanted to do this interview with Coach Leonard, I got it because I know Dan Cox. He and I played we didn't play together, but we both went to Milliken. He played football. I played basketball. and I've known Dan for years. And I asked him to see if Coach Leonard would do it, who he, heartily agreed to. Dan started talking to me about Coach Leonard and how he, how could a guy with 9 state titles be as humble as he is, be as nice as he is? He also is like, Dan said, you can't leave a conversation with Derek Leonard without him asking you how you're doing and following up on that question. If you give just a perfunctory answer that just like, oh, I'm fine, he doesn't allow that. He re-asks to make sure to find out how you're doing. He means it. He's extremely genuine. So when he starts talking about, when he gets pressed about answers on how he's been able to build this, you'll notice his answers aren't, they're nothing profound. They're nothing. You can't just sit there and take notes because there's nothing to do other than he says, oh, it's just organic. I love my kids. We're very genuine with them. We keep pushing. We have the expectations. The expectations are high, but we love on them. We have fun. He does all those things. It's not, but he really means it, and he does it over and over again. So whatever you're talking about, like you say, maybe you say, oh, I do those things. I think it's some self-examination. Oh, do you really? Do you do as much as you could? Could you up that? Could you build that? I mean, when you think about it, you've got a program there that he has had 9 state titles in just maybe a dozen years, which is, we can't, like, come on, right? The fact that he does that and has no rules for his program. He doesn't have this big, long handout of things he does for the program. It's all just organic. He says, hey, just don't embarrass each other and play for each other. And then means it. And means it in everything he says, means it in everything he does, and genuinely builds that. Now, is he a bit of a mad scientist as far as offensive innovations go? Absolutely. And I genuinely believe that. Like, he is, the stuff he does, if you've never really followed Rochester football, it's crazy. Coaches from everywhere up above him, ask him questions and steal stuff from him. And I mean it as being a lifelong Bears fan. I would love it if he would I really think he could be the offensive coordinator for the Bears and would do a phenomenal job, but he probably doesn't want to do that. He likes what he's doing, which says a lot about the guy. Yeah. So is he this mad scientist, offensive innovator? Yes. Yes, he is. But, which is a big part of how he's won 9 state championships, but he's not winning those state championships without the other. It's no different than we talk about, is Michael Jordan, I believe he's the GOAT, right? Absolutely. Did he have this crazy work ethic and mindset that's off the charts? Yes, he did. He was also 6'6", crazy athletic, right? You get 6 NBA titles because you're both, right? He gets 9 state titles because he's both. It's not one or the other. He could draw up all these plays, but it wouldn't matter if he didn't have the kids buying in and wanting to play the same direction and do things for each other. I do think a big part of it, and I love part of the story, is the fact that he gets the kids to see themselves as something more than just a football player. And just like he sees himself as something other than just being a football coach. For him, it's his identity in Christ and how important that is. And I can't tell you how important it is for kids and for coaches to have an identity other than just being a football player, just being a coach. Personally, for me, yeah, I would highly suggest going the route of having, being a follower of Christ be your number one identity, I think. But I think the point I'm getting at is if your only identity is how you do as a coach, how you do as a player, it starts to be a real problem if you start to lose games, if you start to struggle at your sport. If that's all you are, and you are going to struggle at your sport, everybody does. If you leave high school, you're going to get to college, you're going to find out, I'm not as good as I thought I was. Or even if you play it long enough, it starts to slip a little bit. I've worked with a lot of athletes that when things start to slip and they aren't as good as they used to be, that's when a lot of the mental struggles come in. I've talked to a lot of coaches that do the same thing, that they have success for a while or they have to get out of the sport for whatever reasons, monetary, whatever, and they don't know what they are without it. You have to have an identity other than that. And Coach Leonards is being a follower of Christ, but it's also his identity. The identity that they have is they play for their team. It's not, they play to be a Rochester Rocket. It's not all about themselves. And that's huge. He talks a lot about his faith and family and all these things in his book, Victorious, right here. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to buy the book. I highly suggest it. Great book. Tells the story really well. Make a really good gift for anyone really into football, and it's a great story. I'll put that in there, but I'm just really impressed with how he goes about things, how he does it, and how he's had that success. And I think there's some questions there. I love to ask these questions for coaches. He talked about growing this stuff organically, and that's absolutely the best way to do it, but it's also a very long-term thing. It takes time to develop. But I think some of the questions are applicable here. When we talk about organic, we get into, the idea of like growing vegetables and things like that, and organic food and stuff like that. Well, as a coach, I'd like you to think about the end result. What do you want your result to be? What would you like to grow? If you're building something organic, what would you like to grow? And really start asking questions about that. If I'm going to grow this, what do I need? What seed do I need to plant? How do I need to water it? How do I need to fertilize it? All these questions. Am I feeding it enough? Am I watering it enough? Am I really taking care of that seed that I need to grow organically? As a coach, I love these metaphors, and I think that's a really good thing to do. Have I planted the right seeds? Am I watering enough? Am I feeding it enough? And those are very controllable ideas. It's not about, if somebody else would do this, right? If parents wouldn't do this, or if the kids wouldn't do this, and we have all these problems with kids playing AAU or other sports, and if they wouldn't do this, it's not what it's about, right? You have to control what you can. Find out how you can plant the right seeds, water it, fertilize it, and start to make that your focus. Does it mean you're going to win night state championships? No, right? But it means you're going to feel really good about what you're growing, and that's what this is about. So that's my questions for you. That's my thoughts for you. Until next time, this has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. I am your host, Coach Matt Thomann, and remember, forge your mettle. Thanks again for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Mettle Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Mettle Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Mettle Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your mettle.